In the forest, 3 people are running away from an unseen danger. Olga and Nadia accidentally step on a hidden trap, causing them to fall into a hole. They try climbing out, but it's impossible. They ask George for help, but he just apologizes and keeps running. The women tie their clothes to a stick and throw it at the edge, hoping to use it as a rope, but it keeps falling. Seconds later, George also steps on a trap and ends up hanging upside down from a tree. A mysterious person with a knife stabs him and watches him bleed to death. This all started a few days ago. 7 British employees of the Palisade Defence Military Arms Corporation are on the way to a team-building weekend at a lodge in the mountains of Hungary. During the bus trip, they're forced to watch a video from George, who is the president of the company and will be waiting for them at the lodge. He talks about all the things their business has achieved, and team leader Richard makes his assistant Billy take notes. Meanwhile, Steve is more interested in hiring naughty workers for the weekend. Then he hides in the bathroom to smoke, which activates the alarm. As the driver complains, Steve comes out saying it was a short circuit. He spends the rest of the trip eating magic mushrooms. When the bus takes the road around the forest, someone watches it from the bushes. Gordon has a bad feeling, but decides to say nothing. Minutes later, the bus stops because the road is blocked by a tree. Richard shows a map to the driver and asks him to take the road that goes through the forest, but the driver won't do it because he's heard dangerous stories. They argue for a while until the driver snaps and kicks them out. The group has no choice but to walk to the lodge, but Harris refuses and says he's going back to the hotel. Before he can get back on the bus, the driver takes off without any of them. In the woods, someone continues to watch them. The group hears a weird noise coming from the forest and assumes it's just a bear. The mushrooms are starting to have a bad effect on Steve, who feels damp and wonders if he's pissed his pants. The team takes the forest path and starts walking. While everyone is distracted, Steve leaves them behind and enters the woods. The group has to stop when they suddenly hear him scream. Half of the team goes looking for him and finds him peeing. Steve says he saw someone and tries to offer a description, but he doesn't make much sense, so the others blame it on a bad mushroom trip. Then Steve finishes relieving himself, not noticing that his pee is hitting a buried body in the ground. Afterward, Maggie walks while pulling a rope tied to Steve to avoid losing him again. As they leave the area, a bear appears on the road. Eventually they find the lodge and everyone is disappointed to see it isn't as fancy as promised. Steve insists there's someone in the woods, but he's ignored. The group enters the building and finds dirty abandoned rooms with no George in sight, so they think this is the wrong place. Richard refuses to admit he made a mistake and swears this is the right lodge. As Richard begins spouting lots of annoying corporate lingo, Steve's mushroom trip gets worse. After seeing himself in the room, he goes outside for fresh air only to see himself again. Soon Gordon comes out too to explore the place. He finds an old dark room and an abandoned swimming pool where he plays until he falls. Meanwhile, Harris enters the basement to turn on the generator and discovers a cabinet full of files in Russian. Suddenly he hears a noise, so he looks around and discovers a human-shaped bedsheet. When he removes it, he finds a fake skeleton. In the evening, Richard is awakened from his nap by some strange noises. He grabs a knife and opens the curtains, but he sees nothing. Then someone runs in the corridor behind him, so he follows them and discovers bloody footprints that disappear behind a door. He enters the room and finds Maggie in her underwear, asking him to get naughty with her. When she turns around, Harris' face appears and insults him, so Richard furiously stabs him several times. At that moment, Steve comes out of his room and finds Richard still sleeping, which means the incident was just a dream. At the dining table, Billy and Harris are looking at the files and realize that their company is very involved in Eastern Europe. While Gordon serves some pie, Harris theorizes they're in a former asylum. He shares a story from before the First World War about a government receiving too many complaints about an asylum and sending an inspector to investigate. He discovered that all the inmates were going crazy in cells, yelling to be let out. The inspector realized that the inmates had taken over and locked up all the doctors. He tried to reason with them, but the inmates immediately killed him. Then the government hired the team's company to spread nerve gas that massacred the inmates. Rumors say that only one man survived and he wants revenge against every company employee. The team laughs at how ridiculous the story is, but Jill says there's some truth to it. In the early 90s, when the Soviet Union broke up, buildings like this one were detention centers for war criminals like soldiers who enjoyed killing civilians and wiped out whole villages. The government locked them up with the intention of curing them, but it didn't work. Some of them kept escaping and hiding in buildings in the area. In the end, the government bought the company's weapons to kill them all. Maggie calls both stories crazy and thinks this is just an abandoned lodge that went out of business. Steve mocks her by inventing a story, saying this was a naughty lodge in the 60s where attractive nurses took care of rich elderly men. But the nurses couldn't have fun with old people, so they brought a young man to share. When Steve bites his slice of pie, he's horrified to find a tooth. Gordon reveals he didn't make the pie, he just found it on a table and thought it was a welcome gift. Everyone is disgusted because they don't know what they may have eaten. In the middle of the night, Jill wakes up to go to the bathroom, unaware that there's a tarantula on her back. After drinking some water, she steps on a loose board on the ground and almost trips. Back in her bedroom, she looks in the mirror and finally notices the tarantula on her shoulder, but after the initial surprise she gently picks it up and takes it to the window. Suddenly a masked man appears in the bushes and Jill screams, causing him to run away. The team immediately rushes to check on her, but they wonder if she was dreaming because there's nobody inside. Jill swears she saw someone, so they go out to investigate. On the trees, Harris and Billy find a weird metal structure, but no signs of people. Afterward, the team discusses what to do. Richard thinks it was just a local playing a prank and wants to finish their job, but everyone wants to leave. Harris says that in the morning, someone can go to a hill to get a signal and call the driver. When Richard threatens to fire them over this, the others finally team up to stand up to him. The next morning, Richard can't change anyone's mind, so he takes control of the plan and sends Harris and Jill to the hill. While they wait, he still wants everyone to work on the team building exercises. On the way to the hill, the duo discusses Jill's project, which is about mobilization units. These devices will pin their target to the floor instead of blowing up everyone like a landmine, and Jill thinks it's more humane. In fact, she thinks guillotines are more humane than most of the weapons the company makes because they're instantaneous. Harris disagrees, claiming that the brain works for around 3 minutes after the head is chopped off. They interrupt their discussion when they find the bus abandoned in the woods. There's damage and bloodstains all over it. Harris takes the keys before they keep searching the area, only to find the driver dead in the river. His stomach is open and his guts are out, so he was clearly murdered. The duo decides to go back by driving the bus. In the lodge, the group is practicing team building with a match of paintball. Billy and Steve open fire when they see someone running among the trees and the paint hits their target, but the person keeps running as if they hadn't lost. When the duo leaves their hiding spot, Richard takes them by surprise and manages to hit Steve. Billy uses the chance to run to their opponent's flag, but Maggie is waiting and shoots him, getting the victory for her team. Gordon comes out with some notes about their teamwork, so Steve and Billy tell him that they shot Richard, but he kept running. Richard has no paint stains on his clothes, meaning they've shot someone else. When Gordon accuses them of cheating, the others shoot paint at him. He gets annoyed and tries to walk away, only to accidentally step on a bear trap. Gordon screams in pain while the others try to remove the trap. They manage to open it a little bit, however it closes again and makes the wound worse. The guys open the trap over and over while telling Gordon to pull the leg out, but the trap keeps closing too quickly. After several failed attempts, the trap chops a piece of Gordon's leg off. As he collapses in agony, Maggie takes a belt and wraps it around the stump to stop the bleeding. Some blood squirts on Richard's clothes and the shock causes him to drop his gun, which activates another trap. The group looks around and realizes that the bear traps are everywhere. Thankfully, Harris and Jill arrive to rescue them. Now Steve is in charge of putting the severed leg in the bus cooler, which takes a couple of tries. At the same time, someone in the woods throws spike strips on the road. When the group finally leaves, the spikes destroy the tires and the bus crashes, landing on its side and sliding down the road for a few seconds. Night has fallen by the time Jill wakes up. She comes out and finds Harris on the ground with a broken leg. She waves at him before walking away in a dazed state. Then a mysterious man appears with a machete and decapitates Harris with one smooth strike. His head rolls off and his face moves for a few more seconds, confirming his theory. Jill keeps wandering through the woods and only stops to remove a glass shard from her head. She panics when she hears some noises and grabs a log to defend herself, but the masked man appears behind her. Meanwhile, the remaining employees wake up and leave the bus, only to find Harris' body. Richard starts yelling Jill's name and Billy quickly shuts him up, pointing out that a killer must be on the loose. The group agrees they have no choice but return to the lodge and wait until morning to do anything. Together they carry Gordon down the road, unaware that Jill is nearby gagged and tied to a tree. The masked man insults her in Russian before pouring gasoline all over her body. Then he uses a flamethrower to burn her to death. At the lodge, Maggie looks at the files and wonders if Jill's story is true. Richard is a bootlicker and thinks the firearm conspiracies are never true, saying that since their company publicly works with the government they can't do anything immoral. Then the group proceeds to board up the windows and doors to be safer. Since they don't have any medicine, Steve gives Gordon some of his illegal uppers to deal with the pain. While Billy goes to the bathroom, Maggie and Steve sit at the table to smoke and Maggie wonders if they should abandon Gordon to have a better chance of surviving. While they are distracted, a mysterious figure sneaks behind them and drags Gordon away. In the basement, Gordon screams when he sees a scary face. The man gags him and ties him up before he starts carving his stomach with a knife, throwing pieces of skin on a table. The team hears the screaming and finally realizes that Gordon is gone. Behind a previously locked door they find some stairs, so they go down to discover a very creepy basement with survival gear, traps, and dead animals. Only one chicken is still alive and startles them when they pass by. The group then walks down a corridor and finds several cells, so Maggie points out that this isn't a conspiracy after all. When they hear a noise, Richard runs upstairs while the others look behind a door. The mysterious man turns around and reveals that he's carved the company logo on Gordon's dead body. As soon as he sees them he opens fire, so Billy and Maggie rush to hide in a cell while Steve runs away. Maggie then notices that a bullet hit Billy, so he covers her mouth when she starts to cry. His hand falls when he finally dies and Maggie covers him with his jacket. Afterward Maggie goes to the other room to steal a machete. Outside, Richard runs down the forest path, which is seen by Steve from the window. Richard tries to find a spot where he can hide only to end up stepping on a mine, so now he can't move. When the Russian man comes upstairs too, Steve hides inside a wardrobe while noticing a knife on the table. The man searches the house and steps on the loose board, causing it to break. Maggie soon comes after him and accidentally falls through the hole, landing on the lower floor. The attacker hears the noise and comes back to shoot her, but at that moment Steve stabs him with a knife and pushes him down. Maggie then quickly takes his gun and shoots him in the head. Steve and Maggie think it's safe now and leave the lodge, however they find a bunch of Russian men waiting for them outside. Maggie immediately shoots one of them with her last bullet, but she pretends to have more ammo to keep the others at bay. She and Steve start running through the woods as the Russians chase after them, shooting their guns at every opportunity. The duo manages to lose their pursuers by hiding behind a tree, and only keep moving when they can't hear them anymore. They come across Richard, who tells them the model of the mine because their company made it and points at the right spots to jump on so his friends can escape. Then he starts screaming to get the attention of the Russians, who mock him and even spit on him. Accepting his fate, Richard steps off the mine and dies while bringing a few men down at the same time. Maggie and Steve find a fence and crawl under it to keep running. After crossing a bridge, they're surprised to find the real lodge. Inside, George is having fun with Nadia and Olga, who turn out to be the naughty workers Steve hired. Maggie notices a map on the wall and discovers there's a lake with boats nearby. When George hears about the situation, he pulls out the company's latest bazooka. He goes outside and opens fire at the Russians, however the missile flies up and blows up in the sky. The group has to start running again and the beginning repeats. Olga and Nadia fall into the hole and George is killed. Maggie steps on a trap and ends up hanging upside down, so she screams for help. When Steve tries to approach her, a Russian hits him, so Steve hits him back to start a fight on the ground. After some struggle, Steve bites his enemy to push him off and hits him with a branch several times, however the Russian recovers and keeps fighting back. Then Steve manages to steal the guy's knife and stabs him in the rear to finally defeat him. Unfortunately, a second man appears behind him and knocks him down. Meanwhile, another Russian cuts the rope of Maggie's trap and drags her under him. When she tries to fight back, he punches her to knock her out. Then the man tries to take advantage of her, however she's only pretending and waits until he's close enough to bite his face. When she tries to crawl away, the man starts smashing her head on the ground. Maggie manages to find a rock and counterattacks by striking him until he's dead. Then she grabs an even bigger rock to drop on his head. Back to Steve, he tackles the new attacker to steal his gun and quickly opens fire to kill the guy. Unfortunately, the weapon gets stuck and the first Russian uses the chance to throw a knife at Steve's chest. Refusing to give up, Steve kicks the man to make him sit on the knife. Afterward, Steve walks away and removes the knife. The pain is too much to handle and he ends up collapsing near the hole, so he sees the stick with the clothes being thrown over and over. He looks into the hole and smiles when he sees naked women. While searching for Steve, Maggie sees a sign among the trees and starts running faster until she finds train tracks. She follows them to a compound outside the forest that proves Jill's story. After noticing the company boxes, she enters a building and finally finds a phone, so she immediately calls for help. However, the operator leaves her waiting with silly music, and Maggie worries about her safety. When she comes out, she finds a Russian with a flamethrower waiting. Maggie runs to another building while dodging the flames behind her. She runs upstairs and waits until the Russian follows her to then jump through a hole. The landing fails and she hurts her legs, so now she can only crawl. The Russian killer immediately comes after her and gets ready to kill her, but at that moment Nadia shoots him down. Steve and Maggie reunite with a hug and they laugh with relief. Afterward, the survivors find the lake and escape on a boat. Steve looks Maggie in the eye and says that the four of them should get naughty. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.